Epheon uniflorum, spring starflower. Epheon uniflorum, spring starflower. Now folks, this is going to be a geophyte, one of our geophytes, coming from a bulb, all right? Plant's only about 6 to 8 inches tall. The foliage, like many other geophytes, is just linear, fleshy foliage, green in color, a bit glaucous if you touch it. I'm not going to ever ask you to identify any geophyte by its foliage because it looks quite similar to many others, okay? But it's the flowers of this particular geophyte that gives it its name and also is why it's so prized and so heavily sought after, right? So let's take a look. The flowers themselves are born singles well above the foliage. So the flowers will come up maybe close to a foot in height, 10 inches to 12 inches, well away from the foliage, so they're very, very visible, okay? And if you look at the individual flowers, and I've got a couple pulled here, the flowers are star-shaped, hence that name, a star flower, spring star flower, okay? So taking a look, you've got 6 petals, all right? And the key ID feature is going to be on the back. Let me turn this one upside down. Oh, look at that. Those bright purple stripes on the back of the petals. Those bright purple stripes on the back of the petals. You can see it on the back of all of those. That is the key unique thing about Epheon uniflorum that's different from any other geophyte or any other flower that we've done this semester. Linear foliage, star-shaped petals, 6 petals in total with those bright purplish bronze stripes on the backside. And the last thing I'll mention, folks, this is in the Alliaceae family, the Allium family, which is the genus of onion. And the foliage smells just like onions. So if you crush the foliage, it is just like onions, the only geophyte that we're going to learn that smells that way. So if you see these out in person and you're curious if they're Epheon, smell it. If you smell onions, you're likely correct. That plus that star-shaped flower with the very distinct markings on the back should be the key ID features for Epheon uniflorum. Vinca major, greater periwinkle is one of the most common names. But Vinca is the genus of several species of flowering vines in the landscape, or vine-like plants. All right, Vinca major, the greater periwinkle, is going to be one of the larger of the species of Vinca. Okay, so how are we going to classify or identify Vinca major? Well, first, just taking a look at this hillside, most of this is comprised of Vinca major. There's some heterohelix mixed in as well, so I'll be sure not to point that out, or to point that out. But looking at this is a ground cover. It's going to be about 1 foot to 1.5 foot tall, okay? This one's going to be evergreen or semi-evergreen, but usually they're evergreen plants. And they flower in the spring, okay? So the utility is an evergreen flowering ground cover for the landscape, all right? You can also use this in planting boxes or retaining walls, anything of that nature that you use a weeping plant in. So how are we going to identify Vinca major? Well, first of all, the foliage of Vinca, again about 1.5 foot tall, are going to be opposite, all right? Opposite simple leaves. And these leaves are going to be rounded or oval in shape, maybe ovate, all right? And about 2.5 inches long. So simple, opposite leaves, about 2 inches, 2.5 inches long, and for the most part, ovate or circular, okay? Vinca major, greater periwinkle, all right? Now, relative to the flowers of Vinca are going to be this really nice violet blue, all right? Now, we'll not take this off because we are borrowing these plantings here in a neighbor's yard across from campus. But I do want you to see these flowers of Vinca major are about 1.5 inches in diameter, all right? Violet blue in color, very typical of Vinca major. There's the sepals on the back that you can see, and the individual petals are separated. Almost looks like a pinwheel. If you think about the individual petals are a bit spiraling or twisting, kind of like a pinwheel, but about 1.5 inches, maybe up to 2 inches in diameter. Nice light purplish violet blue in color. In addition to the upright foliage, opposite leaves, 1.5 foot tall, and you'll always get the flower with the foliage and the growth habit for an exam to be able to identify Vinca major, greater periwinkle. Trachycarpus fortunei, the windmill palm. Trachycarpus Fortunii windmill palm. Now, there are, even here in central North Carolina and this far north, there are 2 or 3 hardy palms that we can use in our landscapes. And this is one of the most prevalent, the most heavily used. Now, the further east you get to the coast, and then of course the further south you get more palms that are hardy to the coastal regions. But for us being inland and this far north, we don't have many, but this one's really neat. All right, this is one of the plants on my patio actually, so I really enjoy this plant. Now, to identify this particular palm, it's going to be pretty easy. And I say that because the first thing I want you to notice is here on the trunk, notice the fibrous textures, all right? It's like burlap. If you know what burlap is, it's this really fibrous textured material covering the stems. And that's always going to be present on the windmill palm, Trachycarpus fortunii, okay? So let that be number one, is the burlap, a fibrous nature of the stalks, or of the stem. And then you look at these leaves, and each leaf can be 4 or 5 feet long if you look at the petiole, and then the leaf blade itself can easily be 3 feet in diameter, all right? Very large palm-like leaves. I don't think there's anything else that's even closely or remotely similar to that leaf. In addition to the burlap nature of the trunk, should make Trachycarpus fortunii pretty easy to identify. The other thing I'll show you in lecture, when I can actually show you images of different seasons of the year, the inflorescence on these palms can be huge. These large panicles that'll come out at the very, very top of the tree. The panicles can be 2.5 feet in length and width with bright yellow flowers. They're really, really kind of cool. I'll show you those in lecture in photograph form, but for now, take a look at the bark and those very large leaves of Trachycarpus fortunii windmill palm. How cool is this? Corylus avellina contorta, Harry Lauder's walking stick. Corylus avellina contorta, Harry Lauder's walking stick. Folks, this is textbook definition of a specimen plant, all right? Now, this plant is a deciduous, large shrub, maybe a small tree, depending on the age and the size, and if it's been pruned to kind of have a tree shape. But it's a large, kind of rounded formed plant, as you can see behind me, and it is deciduous. Now, I won't even bury the lead, as they say, in regards to what makes this plant truly special, and it's the cultivar contorta. Look at the form and the architecture of the branching of this particular plant, and that is what makes this very unique, very novel. Now, this is a cultivar of Corylus, which is the genus for hazelnut. So if you like hazelnuts or have ever seen hazelnuts grown, all right, this is a derivative from that. Now, this is not going to produce hazelnuts. This is mostly sterile. If you do see fruit, it's relatively rare, okay? This plant is going to be not only planted for, but known and prized for its architecture. One of the few plants that truly has its architecture as the key feature compared to all the other plants that we've done this semester, okay? So, just taking a look at this broad, kind of oval or rounded shaped plant, and you can already see the twisting branches. Now, as you come in a bit closer, one of the other things that's probably really catching your eye are these chains of structures, right? Now, what would those be? Those are catkins. Ladies and gentlemen, in the spring of the year, Corylus puts on the best display of catkins of any other plant that I know. And these catkins, of course, are going to have the flowers for the pollen. These are the male flowers for Corylus. These beautiful long catkins, almost 6 inches long. And there's no shortage of them. My goodness, look at this, all right? And the female flowers, you're asking, where are the female flowers? Well, Becky actually found one just a second ago. And, oh, let's get right there. I'll stay still and see if you can, do you see those little tiny purple flowers? Is it even coming in? Yep. All right. Are you looking at this one or this one?
Yeah, these two.
These two? Mm-hmm. That little tiny purplish red flower, and I'll stay still so that hopefully you can see that. Those are the pistillate flowers right there. All right. You would never see them, never even know that unless you look closely, because the main show here is going to be the staminate catkins that the pollen comes from. But those are the pistillate flowers, just so you can see that. Okay. So, as we kind of wrap up and summarize this and kind of get a shot looking down through these branches, notice the twisting, contorted nature of the branches themselves, plus those pendulous catkins makes Corylus avellina contorta Harry Lauder's walking stick, one of the true specimen prizes of any landscape, and hopefully it's easy to identify. Euonymus japonicus, Japanese euonymus. Euonymus japonicus. Now, Euonymus is a fairly large genus of ground covers, shrubs, even trees, all right? Evergreen, deciduous, native, non-native. It's a pretty broad genus. This is going to be one of the most prevalent, one of the most old-timey, if you will, very long, traditional horticultural plants. Euonymus japonicus, evergreen shrub, all right, ranging 4 to 6 feet tall. All right, they come in a whole host of colors, okay? This one likely is Euonymus japonicus variegatus, but there's a lot of different colors of these, okay? I'm not going to narrow it down to cultivar. I just want you to know the species name, and we'll go through some of the other variations of cultivars in lecture, okay? So how are we going to identify this? Well, there will either be solid green, or in this case, a variegated form, okay? Don't worry too much about that. Let's come in, take a look. All Euonymus have opposite leaves, okay? Opposite leaves. So in this case, looking at these opposite leaves, opposite, they're simple, they're serrated, and again, imagine if it were just solid green. It does not have to be cream, but folks, on an exam for the photographs, I'm going to show you something just like this, okay? I'm not going to pull a curveball and not give you color, all right, since we're learning a plant with color. But serrated leaves, opposite, simple, all right? Even the stems of this particular plant are kind of that same yellowish green in coloration, okay? If you could feel this plant, the foliage, especially when it's young, it feels plastic. It feels like a fake plastic plant. Now again, I know that doesn't help you on a virtual setting, but if or when you come in contact with this, you'll actually, I think if you touch it, you'll get that kind of plasticky, fake feeling about this, all right? Now, one of the common things that occurs with Euonymus japonicus cultivars is that they're very prone to reversion. And reversion, of course, is when in this case, the variegated plant will mutate back into its original form, all right? So if you pan just here, you can see the plant here to my left has done that over the years, in that they were all the Euonymus japonicus variegata yellow color, but some of the branches began to revert back. So this is a good illustration of what the straight species looks like. Euonymus japonicus, just green foliage. You still see all the other features are the exact same. As we've mentioned before, in the case that reversion does occur, you want to extract that out of the plant as soon as possible. Otherwise, it takes over a large portion, and then you go to take it out, and you've got a big hole within the plant, all right? Euonymus japonicus, opposite leaves, serrated margins, most often variegated or solid green, and I'll show you the flowers and some of the other pest issues, which are many on this particular plant in the lecture portion. Aspidistra eladior, cast iron plant. Aspidistra eladior, cast iron plant. Now folks, this is going to be an evergreen, acaulescent ground cover, all right, in shade. Aspidistra is a shade-loving, evergreen, acaulescent, meaning it doesn't have a stem. The leaves come right out of the crown at the ground. Evergreen plant. A few things about Aspidistra. There are almost 50 different species of Aspidistra. This particular one, Aspidistra eladior, is by far the most common. Extremely popular as kind of understory or even tall growing evergreen ground cover plants that need shade. Extremely durable, very hard to kill, very hard to do anything other than just thrive, okay? That is why you may actually have seen Aspidistra cast iron plant as an indoor plant, very common as an indoor plant. Now, hence the name cast iron meaning tough, durable, long-lasting, hard to get rid of, all right? Another common name of this is barroom plant, and I remember in the past seeing old Western movies from the 40s and 50s, and they would have these fight scenes in the Western, in the bars. And I've seen Aspidistra as an indoor plant in bars in Western movies from the 1940s and 50s, all right? Because they can grow in the dark, they can thrive on beer or urine or anything else that people throw on them. They live in very low light conditions, which is why they're great indoor plants, all right? But enough about that. How do you identify it, all right? Well, the plant again is acaulescent, so the height of the plant is going to be the size of the actual leaves and the height of the petiole, all right? The leaves themselves, they're simple, they're very quite large, again 2 to 3 feet in length. The leaf blade, this one's about 6 inches wide, and they're going to be just solid green in color. There are cultivars that are variegated, but the straight species is going to be green in color. And if you take a look, and I've got one little pre-position, make sure no one's looking. Aha! You can actually, oh, this is even better. All right, you don't know what I'm talking about yet, you will in a second. All right, now this is an example of how they propagate, and this is a rhizome. All right, so you see one leaf here, there was one there, another leaf right here. Here's the underground structure. You see the roots. All right, now come in a bit closer. You want to see the flower? There's the flower of Aspidistra elatior. It's just at or below the ground level, and Becky and I were just searching for flowers, and I could not find one, so I literally just pulled this one out, and there it is. But this little tiny flower, you would never see it unless you pull it up, which, why would you do that? All right, or if you dig to the base of the plant and you find it. But that is the really neat flower at the ground level of Aspidistra elatior. There's the roots. You can take this home and plant it. All right, virtually I'm giving it to you, but this is the leaf itself, the petiole, the blade. So you see it's about 2.5 feet tall, rhizomatous, shade-loving Aspidistra elatior, barroom plant, but let's use cast iron plant as the name of this particular specimen. Elyagnus pungens, thorny Elyagnus. Elyagnus pungens, thorny Elyagnus. Now folks, this is a small specimen of what can be a very large shrub. Elyagnus, 15 plus feet, really large both in width and in height, all right? Elyagnus is evergreen, all right? Alternate, simple leaves, like most evergreen plants, very thick, leathery leaves, very coriaceous. They've got a neat feature I'll show you in just a second. But first, I want to show you from that distance, on this young, small plant, notice these tall shoots, all right? These tall shoots on Elyagnus. These are called whip shoots, W-H-I-P, whip shoots. You have no idea where it gets that name, I'm sure, all right? But these whip shoots are like a bad hair day, but those make identifying Elyagnus from a distance really quite easy with those long whip shoots. Now these whip shoots, as the plant gets larger, these can actually go up into a tree and keep climbing, almost like a vine. But they're not a vine, but these whip shoots are very distinctive, very, very interesting way to identify Elyagnus, okay? So, if you come in a bit closer, take a look at the leaves, all right? The leaves are alternate, they are simple, but what I want you to see, let me turn that over. This is the front side, and the back side. Let me get it, there we go, straightened out. All right, front side is green. Folks, the back side is going to be a silverish gold backside on the leaf of Elyagnus pungens, and that silvery gold underside is unlike anything else that we have or will do, okay? Let me point it out here on the actual leaf itself, or on the plant itself. Flip it upside down and see those golden silvery backs, all right? Now, this plant actually flowers in the fall of the year, and in the spring are fruit. And here's an example of what the fruit will look like. Really, really small. This will turn bright, or like a really dull but dark red maroon color, and they are actually edible, all right? Now, you're not gonna wanna dine on them all day long, but they are a bit sweet if you wanna eat those. Be careful because they are drupes. So there's a hard pit in the center, okay? But that's what the maturing fruit looks like. And then the last thing I'll mention to you, thorny Elyagnus is the common name. Let me take that leaf off. And right here, if you can see this thorn, this shortened branch, which is transformed into a sharpened structure. So this is why it's called thorny Elyagnus. It does have these side lateral thorn-like structures that make it very difficult to prune or to handle. But here are the thorns on the side. In addition to those alternate gold back leaves, and with those whip shoots, all of these features should make Elyagnus pungens, thorny Elyagnus, fairly easy to identify, I hope. golden bamboo, Philostachia aurea. Golden bamboo, Philostachia aurea. Now this is going to be the only bamboo, the only true bamboo that we do this semester, okay? You're likely familiar with bamboos of various sizes and shapes and a lot of history of bamboos, not just that pandas eat them, but their aggressiveness or invasiveness in the landscape, okay? I'll mention that to you in just a second at the end of this. But for identifying the golden bamboo, I think it's going to be pretty simple. Now, one of the things we must do is switch our terminology just a bit, because with talking about grasses, the terms change a bit. So for example, the stems of grasses are called culms, C-U-L-M, all right, culms. So we'll talk about the blade and then the culms of this particular one. It's going to be pretty easy for you, okay? So it gets its name golden bamboo because the culms, the actual stems, are of this yellow color, okay? You've got this light yellow, greenish yellow color of the stems all the way down to the ground on golden bamboo, okay? Now this plant will only get 6 to 8, maybe 10 feet tall. Depends on the soil volume it has and the various other features, but about 6, 8 foot, maybe 10 is what I've seen the golden bamboo do, all right? Or get to as far as size. Now, if you take a look at one of the branches, I'm just gonna take this off. Oops, all right? And you can see these linear leaves, okay? The leaves are very linear, long, narrow. Now, what is also true with different grasses, and bamboo is a monocot, it is similar to a grass, is they have what you can't see are serrated leaf margins. Now, we talked about serrate leaf margins in that is forward pointing teeth, okay, on different plants. You cannot really see the teeth on these, hence why they're called serrulate, which is diminutive, even smaller. And those serrated margins are super sharp. And if you've ever been cut by grass or bamboo or ornamental grass, especially if you pull your finger backwards, you'll feel those super fine teeth and they will cut your flesh, okay? So be careful about that. But if you can hone in here, one of the other identifying features, the wind is blowing, other than these linear leaves that are green in color and serrated margins, if you look at the stems or the culms themselves, you see the little white markings? There's little white glaucous bands. Oh yeah, you can see it pretty well in the video there. Those white glaucous bands are very key. We haven't seen anything like that with any other plant this semester where the culms, or in this case the stems, have those tiny whitish blue glaucous bands. Folks, that plus the yellow color of the culms, plus those linear green leaves that are serrated sharp if you happen to touch it, should hopefully get you to Philostachia aurea, all right, golden bamboo. Last thing I want to show you, relative to the aggressive growth pattern and behavior of bamboos, the reason you see, if you can see from the video, there's 1, 2, 3 clumps of this particular plant. And notice it's not spreading. Why isn't it spreading? Well, if you come in a bit closer, there's a 3-inch concrete culvert that they're planted into, and that 3-inch deep, or thick rather, concrete culvert goes down 6 feet. At least that's what I was told years ago. I'm not going to dig it up to prove that wrong, but I know it is 3 inches of concrete surrounding this plant, and that's what keeps the rhizomes inside without spreading. Golden bamboo, Philostachia aurea. Prunus caroliniana, Carolina cherry laurel, Prunus caroliniana. Now folks, this is going to be an evergreen tree, maybe about 20, 25 feet tall most commonly. It is native, all right? And this is also going to be one of the most aggressively weedy species of tree, native or non-native, okay? Maybe not invasive, but certainly weedy. We'll talk about that in just a second, and also a bit more in the lecture portion. So how are we going to identify this evergreen tree, all right? Now, the foliage of Prunus caroliniana is going to be alternate and simple, all right? Alternate and simple. And the good thing about teaching at this time of the year is we can see some of the winter features as well as some of the upcoming spring features, okay? So instead of looking at the particular tree, I've got some samples here that may illustrate things a bit better, okay? Now first we'll start here. And this is a cutting that I took off of a mature tree. And I want you to notice several things. One, the alternate, simple leaves. The leaves of Prunus caroliniana are often very glossy or shiny, as I think you can hopefully illustrate there. Now I want you to notice the petioles. The petioles of Prunus caroliniana are purple in color. Now that is a winter feature, a seasonal characteristic of the winter when the petioles of the plant will turn dark purple as illustrated here, all right? Now, in the summertime when new foliage flushes this spring and in the summer, the petioles will go back green. So this is a seasonal thing, but for right now it can help. Another thing, notice the axillary flowers that are developing. All right, these axillary racemes are beginning to develop and will open in the coming weeks. And these racemes will be about 2 inches tall, erect on top of the foliage, and the individual flowers will be white in color, okay? So you're seeing the developing racemes. Now, a couple of other things I wanted to point out about the foliage. One of the common features, and it's actually a disease of the genus Prunus, is a disease called Cercospora, and Cercospora is the genus of this fungus. The common name is shot hole disease, and I've got it, oh yeah, right, see the hole in the leaf? All right, it's commonly called shot hole disease, and it's called that because it looks like it's been shot with like bird shot from a shotgun, all right? And this circular little concentric rings that you'll often see in the leaves of Prunus are a great way of maybe suggesting that it is a Prunus, because this disease affects Prunus species very heavily. So it's very common to see the shot hole disease. Now, one of the other things, a leaf fungus, notice the purplish coloration in the leaves. All right, see those purple little blotches or dots. All right, that's a fungus as well that may not be detrimental to the plant, but it's a great way to help identify the plant. And I've got a few other leaves here pulled off that have that purplish coloration. Oh yeah, look at that. All right, notice those red petioles right there too. Glossy in color, yes, yes, yes. All right, now, this is the adult feature. These are all features of an adult mature foliage plant, okay? Now, it is critical to understand that the juvenile foliage of Prunus caroliniana can and will be serrated. And I have happened to find, all right, let me move this out of the way. I found a little seedling. You hold still and I'll just move the thing. There we go. I found a little seedling and I'll just move like this. You can see I pulled it right up. And if you look at the foliage on this little seedling, notice that the leaves are serrated. Oh yeah, look at that. Notice that the leaves are serrated. It still has some of that purplish coloration from the fungus, but those serrated leaves should not, I hope, throw you off, because it's identical to this. It's just juvenile versus the adult version right here, okay? Prunus caroliniana. Now, the last thing I'll mention about identifying features of this particular plant, this plant, like a lot of other Prunus, will have chemicals that make them smell like cherry. So if in person you happen to come across a specimen, you've checked the boxes of all of these features that tell you it's Prunus caroliniana, one of the things you can do to confirm that is to just go to the stem at the end and scratch with your fingernail, scratch the bark off, right? Not the leaf, but have the actual stem. Scratch the bark off and then smell it, and it smells just like maraschino cherries, those candied red cherries that are in fruitcake or on top of a ice cream sundae or something. All right, that cherry smell is very prevalent with Prunus caroliniana. So, tree, evergreen, alternate simple leaves, red petioles in the winter time, developing axillary erect racemes in the spring, shot hole disease, and that purple fungus are very common. And then you've got the juvenile characteristic of the serrated leaves, all the things for Prunus caroliniana. Pearl bush, Exocorda racemosa, pearl bush. Folks, this is a large deciduous shrub at maturity. Exocorda racemosa pearl bush, deciduous shrub, multi-stem, wonderful arching habit. And this is one of the largest, oldest specimens that I know of, I've ever seen. And even when it's this big, you can see that arching, wonderful habit. Now, it takes a lot of space. Now, don't let that deter from maybe looking at this for a potential plant, because when they're younger, they're much more tidy, uniform in their size and shape, okay? So the leaves are going to be alternate and simple, as I'll illustrate in just a second, alternate and simple. And it's going to be the flowers in the spring of the year that make this not only desired, but also easy to identify, okay? So come on in just a quick second. I'll look at the foliage first, just so you can see the foliage is alternate, but it's clustered on dwarf shoots. And I won't move around too much just so you can see that. But it's clustered on dwarf shoots. All right, the leaf shape would be obovate, broadest across the middle, tapering to the bottom, obovate leaf. All right, you may see some serrations at the very, very top of the leaf. Can you see those, Becky? All right, there's some serrations at the very, very top. Nowhere else are there serrations, okay? So alternate simple leaves. There may be a few serrations only at the top. Obovate, broadest across the tip, and the foliage is clustered on dwarf shoots. All right, well, let's talk about the name, pearl bush. Well, folks, these raceme, the inflorescence is a raceme, and in the spring of the year when these racemes come out, the unopened flower buds are in the shape and color of pearls. So these are the unopened buds, and you can hopefully see why it's called pearl bush, from those pearl-like buds. And then when the flower actually opens, pure white in color, but I think they're even more attractive when there's some out and some that are not yet opened, and that kind of gives this impression. So if you look this way, you can see both flower buds that have opened, others that have not, and all those chains of pearls. Very easy to identify in its bud state. It gets a bit more tricky once the flowers have disappeared, but those leaves being very distinct should help in identifying Exocorta racemosa, the pearl bush. Indian hawthorn, Raphiolipus delacorii. This is an interspecific hybrid, so Raphiolipus x delacorii, Indian hawthorn. This is going to be a small, compact, evergreen shrub in the landscape. These plants, I know, 6 to 8 years old, not been pruned at all to my knowledge, and you see the overall form and size of these plants. So truly kind of compact, small plants. They are evergreen to semi-evergreen, as I'd mentioned to you before. The leaves have a lot of features, all right? And then I'll show them to you, but for the leaves, they're alternate, they're simple, they're coriaceous, they're serrated, they're undulate, and they are reticulate. Now hopefully most, if not all of those terms already have a meaning to you, but let's come on in and I'll show you what that is, all right? The leaves, of course, alternate, and you see that they're simple. Coriaceous means they're thick and leathery. The margins are serrated, and probably, I'm not sure how the best shows serrations.
The small one.
The small one? Oh yeah, right there. See the serrations? Okay. Reticulate, the term reticulate just means venation, network of vein patterns. So let me just zoom in right there. How about that? See the network of veins, reticulate. Undulate means wavy, so the leaves are often wavy. A lot of features. The other leaf feature I want to show you, because this plant is in the Rosaceae family, it is often prone to a lot of fungal diseases and pathogens, and I've pulled several leaves here that show these concentric kind of circular purple patterns in the leaves, and that's just a fungus, very prone to members of the Rosaceae family, and it's almost a great identification feature itself, okay? So the leaves have a lot of really cool features, plus the plant is really compact, truly a dwarf plant, and you get to see the overall form as well as the diseased leaves. The flowers are going to be born in the next few weeks, so it flowers later in the spring, pink in color, transitioning to kind of white, and they will produce an abundant amount of purple fruit, which I'll show you in the lecture portion. Raphiolipus x delacorii. Viola x rocchiana. Pansies. Any questions? Probably one of the most commonly known or recognized annuals, certainly during the winter months, but Viola is a fairly large genus, a lot of native and non-native species of Viola, but this particular garden pansy or bedding plant, a color annual for the winter, Viola x rocchiana, common name pansy. These are going to be herbaceous, and of course these are the #1 selling, the #1 most used annual bedding plant in the winter months. All right, a whole host of colors, okay? Lots and lots and lots of colors. The flower shape itself, and we'll zoom in a second, is zygomorphic, so it's kind of shaped very irregularly, so an irregular shaped flower head. Smaller petals up front, larger petals at the back, really bright eye spots. I'll show you these things in just a second. But on an exam, I would show you the whole plant so you could see in a planting bed, also kind of zoom in on those flowers, all right? Now, this is being a plant prized for its flowers. I'm not going to talk much about the foliage, but I do want to show you the leaves, all right? The leaves are alternate. but they're very interesting, all right? Zoom in a second. The leaf, and I've already taken one off, the leaf of Viola with rocchiana is simple and alternate. Here's the blade, here's the petiole. But one things that Viola have are stipules. And this is one entire leaf. This is the pair of stipules, the leaf-like appendages at the base of the leaf, right? Stipules, petiole, blade. So that is the true, complete leaf of Viola with rocchiana. And then to illustrate this particular flower, notice that the smaller petal is often single, and then you have the multiple whorls of petals at the back. But then the bright eye spot, in this case the eye spot is yellow on this flower, but the yellow eye spot indicates to a pollinator where the throat of the flower is, which is going to be where the pistil and or nectar is, okay? So the bright spots in the center of flowers are just to aid pollinators in guiding them to the center, okay? So there's the shape of the traditional pansy, and there's various different colors, of course, but a key thing to note is what the true leaf of a Viola with rocchiana is.